Evet, yavaş yavaş başlayabiliriz.
We can start.
Öncelikle ben Kapital Dergisi'ne,
First
Yayıncı
and
Dergisi'ne her
foremost,
sene bu başarılı
I
organizasyonu
would like to
gerçekleştirdiikleri için çok
congratulate and
teşekkür
thank Capital and
ederek başlamak
Economist
istiyorum.
magazines for such a
Bugün en
successful
önemli
event. I
paneli
believe this is the
neden?
most important
Çünkü
panel of today
eğitim
because
bundan
we
önce
will speak
konuşulan her
about the
şeyi
education,
gerçekleştirmek
and the
için
education
olmazsa
is indeed
olmazlardan.
essential for realizing
Bugün
what have
aslında
been
ben
discussed
konuşmacı
so
olarak
far.
yer alacaktım ama
Normally, I
sevgili
was going to
dostum
be the
Mehmet Nane'nin
speaker, but
çok
my friend
değerli bir
Mehmet
yakınının
Nane
vefatı haberi üzerine İstanbul'a gitmesi
lost
söz konusu
one
oldu.
of his relatives, and as a result of
Dolayısıyla
that,
ben
he
hem
had to
moderatör
go
hem de
back to
konuşmacı olarak karşınıza
Istanbul.
çıkacağım.
So
Beni
I am
tanımayanlar için
both the
kendimi çok
speaker
kısaca
and also the
tanıtayım.
moderator of this session.
İsmim Burak
My
Aydın.
name is Burak Aydın.
Çok kısa bir geçmiş zamana kadar Intel eski genel
Very
müdürü
recently, I was working as Intel General Manager,
akıllı enerjiler
and
ve
right
akıllı
now I
şehirler
am working
şirketi olan Silver Spring Network
in the company of Silver Spring Networks. I am the EMEA president. So you can ask me why you are with us in this education panel. I am the STEM working group of TÜSİAD, and we are attaching significant importance to the education, and we are developing huge projects for the well-being of Turkey. We have many important guests. We have two ex-ministers with us, and we have the rector of Okan University. That's why I believe this panel will be beneficial for everyone. With your permission, I would like to observe the current situation in globe and also in Turkey. And I also would like to say a couple of things what Finland is doing and what Estonia is doing and what we can learn from them. And everybody kept saying that Turkey needs a new story, and what can we do with the education when we prepare ourselves for the future? With your permission, I would like to make an observation about the current situation in the education of Turkey. 17% of the global population doesn't know how to read or write. 122 million of young doesn't know how to read or write, and 61% of them are female. And many adults do not know how to read or write on the global basis. And one more year in your education will translate into an increase by 10% in your salary. So, education is directly affecting the salaries and the wages of the people, and it is an important factor to get rid of mid-income trap. If you take a look to the current problems of today, like the migration influx and their effect on the developed markets, disturbing developed markets, require us to close this gap between the developed markets and the developing markets in terms of the education. I also would like to speak about the professions of the future. Everything is becoming digitalized. Right now, robots are a reality in our lives, and we are speaking about the Industry 4. But these topics were not discussed 20 years ago. Right now, we are urgently discussing them, and we know that the technology will penetrate even more into our lives. And as we are innovating, we have to do disruptive innovations. That means that the industries of today, together with the advancing technology, will restructure themselves, and as a result, we have to change our educational systems and educational models. If we get caught unprepared for that, then we will lack the quality personnel who will be able to run the factories. With your permission, I also would like to say a couple of things about Turkey, and then these topics will be enriched with the Finland and Estonian examples. But let me briefly speak about the Turkish situation in the education. If you take a closer look to the figures, we will come to a consensus that we are not in a place in terms of the quality of our education. In terms of the number of the schools, we increase the number of our schools so much. In our classes, we are speaking about smart tables, and all of our classes are connected to the internet. With the physical infrastructure, we are okay. But in terms of the quality of education, we have a lot to do, because that's why PISA results are showing us. According to the PISA survey, unfortunately, Turkey is ranking at the 50s out of 70 countries. This is indeed a striking result. I don't want to demotivate you going into the details of this. Since we are only preparing for the university exams, unfortunately, the motivation of our students are quite different. But we have to change this mentality. If we take a look to the examples, Estonia, for example, is at top 10 countries in PISA results. They are number 3 country in science. They have the population of 1.3 million, and their GDP per capita is approximately $29,000. Finland has 5.5 million population, and it is one of the role model countries in the PISA results. In all of the country analysis, Finland is referred to. Although their ranks were reduced a little bit in 2015, but they are still at top 5 country, and their GDP per capita is $42,000 US. I spoke about the Turkish figures already. Korea, for example, is at the top 10 according to the PISA results. Therefore, this is what I make as an observation. And I will say one more thing. Maybe you have encountered with it in Twitter. There were some statements about the educational system in Turkey. And, you know, during the primary schools, we were using some show cards. And according to such show cards, people are saying that the reason is quite clear why we are not so successful. Because in Japan, the show cards are saying us that in order to live, you should create. In England, they say if you don't know your history, you cannot manage your future. In Germany, the life is starting with the discipline, but in Turkish show cards, it just says, Ali, look to the horse. But unfortunately, we should change those show cards, or we should probably say, Ali, look to the space, or Ayşe, do some sort of invention. Right now, I would like to yield the floor to my guests. Let's start with Estonian example, with your permission. Estonia is a really good example for us because they have many success stories in this field, in the educational field. Although they are a small country, but they have a software which is well known, Skype. Their education system is quite successful. They are at the top 10 countries, and their welfare is very well known. Skype in 2009 was sold to IB by $2.92 billion, and then this was sold to Microsoft to the value of $8.5 billion. So by using new technologies, they are creating huge income, and they are investing to the future technologies and becoming successful. With your permission, I would like to ask my question in English.
First question is related to Estonia. Can you a little bit talk about what is the success story behind becoming the top 5 country in the PISA scores? I mean, what did you do well? I mean, how did it go well and you come up with the great scores? What can we learn from your example?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation, the opportunity to address this audience. Let me first say that we don't know. What we do know, however, is that we do have quite a long historic tradition of having broad-based education. I think we've been 99.9% literate for more than 100 years. This is, I think, one of the components of success. Another thing, which I do believe is extremely important, especially in a case of a small country who only gained its independence less than 100 years ago. Actually, we are going to celebrate our 100th anniversary next year. Coming from foreigners-dominated country, to work yourself through to better position, bigger income, higher status, the only way was through education. That basically meant that families who were looking for a better future for their children asked them to go to schools, to learn hard, and there's a general respect towards schools, teachers at large, and education. The social status of education as a social phenomenon, I believe, is extremely important. And then, last but not least, two important comments. Money doesn't make good education. Good laws may facilitate, but they don't make good education. Infrastructure does not make good education. Teachers make good education. Invest in your teachers. Encourage them, train them well, and then last but not least, trust them. Don't inspect them. Don't control them too much. Don't force them to obey rules. Tell them what is right and what is wrong, and trust them to teach your children. I think good teachers want to teach well. There is no need to tell every day what is right and what is wrong. And then one more thing that I think is extremely important and what characterizes statistically the Estonian results in PISA tests, and what unfortunately characterizes from the negative sides these countries who lag behind, to a certain extent Turkey included. We have a very egalitarian education system. And that is not just happening so. It was very deep in the basic concept of the national education systems. All schools shall be equal. All schools shall be equal and nobody is left behind. So that the results of separate schools, be they rural or town schools or city schools, big schools or small schools, disadvantaged areas, low-income environments, high-income environments, the differences are very, very small, much smaller than in a number of countries. And it's much easier to raise the average by supporting the weaker ones than trying to make the top 1% 2 times better than they are. So investing into the lower third and middle layers of your young population, there is a strong potential. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now the second question is the Finland ex-minister, Mr. Steinbeck. How did you differentiate your education system from the rest of the other worlds? I'm definitely sure that everyone inspired by the Finnish education system, and everyone is keeping an eye on you, how you are doing and what you are doing right. What was the magic hint that you did very well?
Thank you. Let me, however, start by congratulating Turkey for beating Finland in football last night in Istanbul. I think it's time come to it that we ask Turkey to come and play some ice hockey to Finland. Well, let's go to the next competition, the PISA competition. Unfortunately, it is a kind of competition that Estonia and Finland are in the higher end, but I don't really believe in competition between nations in that respect. I could repeat much of the history which my friend from Estonia here said. The Finnish story started in the 1860s, nation building again. The prophet, if you call him the father of the Finnish elementary school, Uno Signeus, said his slogan was that the perfect school class is one where the pupil speaks more than the teacher, which was quite a radical slogan at that time, as you may understand. We also building national identity through giving a good start for everybody, and we could stand against Russification, for example, in the beginning of the 20th century, gaining independence 1 year earlier than Estonia, so we're also celebrating 100th anniversary this year. After the Second World War, that was a time of radical reform in many respects, and then politicians started to dream about a comprehensive school. We had a grammar school, private grammar school system, and in the 60s, law was passed of a comprehensive school. And 72 it started in Lapland in the north of Finland and slowly went through the whole country. When I became Minister of Education, the whole Finland had already adopted the comprehensive school, where grammar school, elementary school, civic schools, all was united into one line. In the beginning we had ability groups for different, but we abandoned that in 84, I think, 85. Now every pupil is brought to the same level in the same class, not in separate groups or anything like that. What are the secrets? We have a lot of visitors coming to Finland. We have hundreds of groups coming to Finland. So we have standard answers, of course, to that. One of them is the same as Estonia: teachers, teachers, teachers. We started academic training of teachers rather early, and now almost 95% of all teachers have 5 years master's degree in teaching. That is the prerequisite, I think, for every country which want to have a system which is bringing equity, which is bringing in standards. And I would also like to say here in the beginning that Finland, answer your question, how do we differ from the rest of the world, let's say the trends in the world? There are many countries who are very concerned about the level of teaching, the level of education, so they look for solutions. One of the solutions, they believe many countries, I could start with the US, for example, competition between schools should bring results. We don't believe in that. Schools should cooperate instead. They should not compete between each other. The other thing, many countries believe that by enforcing standardized learning, standardized qualities, you put them on the national level and say, you have to perform. We don't believe in that. We have a national curriculum, but it is not enforced. The teacher in the school itself has the right to modify the teaching concerning to the local needs, to the needs of the school. In many countries, you believe that by focusing on literacy and numeracy, also mathematics is very important, you get good result. The Finnish system is trying to focus on the totality of the child, the whole child. So we don't, let's say, increase the number of lessons in those literacy and numeracy. We also have playing, sports, arts, and so on. That is the totality, creating an individual. Many countries have introduced tests, national tests, on all levels. And there are also tests for teachers. How do they, if you got a salary increase, if you are getting good results for it, we don't believe in that. We believe in, as our Estonian friend has said, that teachers give the freedom. 90% of our teachers, when asked 5 years, 10 years after they started, do you regret you became teacher? They said, no, we are happy to be a teacher. Partly because to become a teacher is not very easy. Only 10 to 12% of those applying are accepted to become teachers. So there's a good quality among them, because teaching is a respected profession, and that is very, very important to have respect for teachers. Finally, school choice. In many countries, parents demand that my children should have the right to go to the best school. We don't believe in that. All schools should be good. And so there is no market for private schools in Finland. There are no private schools actually in Finland. You have the right to build a private school, but very few. We have a few language schools in French and Russian and German or something like that. And a few, 3 or 4 religious schools, but that's all. It's not prevented, but there is no market for that. All schools should be there. So this is another where we believe in equity and of outcomes of the schools, not in trying to pick out the talented and put them separately and give them privileges. They should be in the normal school. That is why this is my final, we have a minimum difference between schools, minimum difference between the highest and the lowest. That is why we are in the top of PISA. Thank you.
Great, many thanks, many thanks. Şimdi ben Şule hocama dönmek istiyorum.
Now I would like to turn to Mrs. Şule so that we hear about Turkey. We listen to the Finland and Estonian examples. We have valuable former ministers of education, so they provided us with some input about what should be done for a correct education landscape. So I would like to ask you, why do you think we are lagging behind in PISA scores? We have little time, so I will ask my second question to you right now. Also, what do you think should change in our education system urgently? Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers. We are running out of time, so I will try to use my time efficiently. I will have some points to make. First of all, when I take a look at the female-male ratio, we have probably 12 females in about 90 speakers. This is another point I would like to make. It's not relevant, but it should be noted. But it's all about egalitarianism. In education, I believe we need a system of equality, both between schools and genders. By the way, I am honored to be in the same place with the former ministers of education from Finland and Estonia. The points they made were really valuable. As you know, our grades in PISA are declining rapidly, and correct treatment can only come with correct diagnosis. Let's just accept and embrace the truth. The national education system of Turkey has been in a crisis situation for a really long time. Maybe we are dealing with infrastructural problems, but the reality is not so pleasant. So why is PISA important? Well, PISA is not only relevant to education because the PISA outcomes are directly related to the business world. Students that have completed the age of 15 are entering the PISA test in 3 different areas, 3 different focused areas to see their competencies. And the results Turkey obtained show us that we are in the last places among OECD countries. Right now we rank 50th on average among 72 countries. Turkey, with its economic growth, with its history and culture, does not really deserve this unpleasant situation. But it should be understood that if it goes on like this, we will not achieve those development and growth goals we are so desirably setting. Because you can only cook with what material you have. Everybody has a role to play. Starting from preschool education and going on with primary, secondary, and high schools all the way to the universities, I have been observing the same thing. The students I see in my university are not well educated, they are not well equipped, they are loaded with information, but if it's the right thing to say, we have to reformat them because they don't know how to question, how to think freely. They are simply loaded with information. That's all about them. So, what do we have to change? We have to change the entire system, in my opinion. It is, of course, important to gain knowledge, but without straying away from science. You have mentioned STEM, for example. Informatics, mathematics, and literacy, they are all basic skills, and I don't think Turkey has taken adequate steps to create such a good environment. The current education is an indoctrinating one. Regardless of its content, it cannot create a new vision for Turkey. All kinds of changes are done haphazardly. Every new minister does something differently, changes the system, as if they were rediscovering America. The Estonian and Finnish examples are right in front of us. If we take a closer look, we can learn something. By the way, let me talk a little bit about the role of universities. These students come to my university from a faulty, from a criticized national education system. In classical universities, they are loaded with information once again, for a second time. But the next-gen university should do this highly differently. It should be a place for them where innovation starts, entrepreneurship, innovation, Industry 4.0, which are topics of our discussion all day today, should be grasped, should be within the grasp of the student in a university environment. The engine of development and economy is education. And ironically, we are talking about education in the last session, although it's the first thing to start with about everything. Education being the last topic of the day, in the last session of the day, should not be so ignored. But we should not be hopeless. We should be simulating probably good examples. If simulation is really good, it is going to create good results too. What I mean by that is we need to work, study on fine examples. This is all for now. Thank you. We will have a really rapid second round. Before that, I will make my remarks. As the head of the TÜSİAD STEM working group, we are covering topics like science, technology, engineering, and maths. It's an awareness movement that we started. And it is a continuation of another program that started 2 years ago. And soon enough, it will be publicly launched. Why are we doing this? Because here in Turkey, science, technology, maths, engineering entrepreneurship and art do not really get the attention that they deserve. From now on, all the new jobs to be created, all fields of activity are going to have some part of each of these topics. They will have to be conducted in an interdisciplinary manner. The Ministry of National Education is naturally the locomotive of this task. They are taking strides, they are taking steps, and there is still a lot to be done. This is correct. But I think parents should be more knowledgeable about education too, because this journey that starts with preschool education should lean toward better jobs, better fields of activity, and the parents are going to be the people who are going to guide their children at first instance. They should also make sure that their children learn how to dream in a self-confident manner. So we talked about PISA scores and how Turkey performed in that regard. But just like Mrs. Schule said, there is a lot to do, but we cannot lose hope. In the year 2014, we were here in the Uludağ Economy Summit. If we were discussing about the national education in Turkey, we would probably not even be aware that Aziz Sancar would be winning the Nobel Prize someday. Only a year later, actually. I mean, success stories can come out of our country too. We can raise scientists who can get the Nobel Prize. I mean, we should keep dreaming about creating a base on Mars, for example. We need to demand more from the national education system, but not just from public schools, but also from private schools. In the last decade, you will see that the trend is all about engineering schools shutting down. Business administration and law faculties, however, had a trend where they received more and more applications. This is not a nice trend because everything is leaning towards science and technology. So in this last round, I am going to ask a quick question to my valuable panelists. Everything is changing, technology is evolving our lives, so what is going to change in the future? Even education is not going to stay the same.
Asking you a very short question. Everything is changing and nothing is standing still, right? And education is not isolated to this fact. Right now, the kids who are starting their education journey as a first grades doesn't really know about what their job will be. 75% of the jobs will be created in the next 15 years or 20 years. So we are about to prepare the first grade students to an unknown future, but the basics are the same. So how do you think the education system will evolve in the future, considering the technology and the change comes with the technology, the virtual teams, the internet is making the knowledge everywhere, anytime. So what's your point on this one? So let me start with the Estonia ex-minister.
Well, let me first say that everywhere in the world, on all meetings, we will be talking more about education, skills gaps, and challenges ahead. And I'm sure when the remark was made that this is the last session on education, I'm sure the next Uludağ summit will have more discussion on education. The industry, the businesses will force us on that track. It's not an educational problem. It's a developmental challenge. Secondly, let us not criticize our education system. Education system is a national child. We have to love, even if it's weak. We have to take care not to criticize it too much. Loving it, it doesn't mean that the Minister of Education has to take care. All ministers have to take care. Otherwise, things won't change. And for a change, we need constant commitment over a generation, because education is very slow to move. But coming back to the challenging question of what's waiting us ahead, it is very clear that we have to develop more generic or personal skills, much more than I've done so far, when classical education has been strongly discipline-centered. Mathematics, physics, chemistry, language, history. We see that things are changing. We need this basic knowledge. But the most important quality we have to develop in our children is the ability to learn lifelong learning skills. Learning skills are very, very important. What is even more important concerning educational policies, learning skills are developed at very early years, long before our compulsory education starts at 7 or 6 or 8. We have to pay attention to preschool education, where very basic personal skills are developed. Kindergartens. I think we have to pay more and more attention to early childhood education. And this is not a simple task. We also need very competent and well-trained teachers at the very early age, because a child is a very, very complicated thing. We have to know and we have to be able to develop these personal skills at the very early age. And if we succeed in that, we create students who are able to learn in schools, in high schools, in universities, and lifelong. I think that's the biggest challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I completely agree with what Estonian colleague here said. I could only add, as we are working on overtime, I'll be very short. But I would say one warning saying, don't bring technology into the school. It's already there, because the students are bringing it in. They are already, very ready to, but don't believe that the future of the school is in new technology. It is a relationship between the teacher and the pupil. It is more than technology, so to say. I could offer only one instrument for how to, let's say, that the school should education should keep track with the evolution of, let's say, of society. Our teachers in Finland are ready, 75% them are ready annually to take additional training. They go voluntarily on a Saturday for training. This is a prerequisite for them keeping track of what is happening in society. So I think that again, we are back in high-quality teachers. If they are motivated, and I would say that there are many confusions in this respect. Many come to Finland and say, well, you must have high salaries for your teachers. That's not true. We are below the OECD average. So many come to Finland and say, we need more teaching hours. No, US has the most teaching hours. The Danish system is not very good, I can say. And Estonia and Finland are among the six with the lowest number of teaching hours. It's not a solution to the challenges we have. And I finally agree with my Estonian friend here that business success is to a larger and larger extent depending on the quality of your education. So don't forget that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sevgili hocam, son sözü de size vermek istiyorum. Kısa bir cümle alabilirsiniz.
Words to you. Could you please make a remark? So what do we have to do? First of all, we need to start with the quality of the teacher, which is in charge of educating our children. And that starts with our faculties of education, where we will have to need help from both the government and from the private sector. First of all, government is not the only helping hand we have. We cannot expect everything from them. So, let's take a look at the private sector. The private sector could contribute to economy and education through direct and indirect investments. Well, if we are in an economy summit right now, let's note it that we require a meeting point for the business world and the education. The private schools usually engage in education with their private universities. This is direct investment, actually. We need a little bit tweaking. There can be some indirect investments too, and it cannot be ignored. They can encourage universities to raise fine businessmen who are equipped with critical thinking. They can do that by collaborating with such universities. This is my calling for the business world. Please do engage in more projects with us. Establish your research and development centers together with us. Support our own research and development activities. And I'm not just talking about my own university. I'm talking about the entire university world. When it comes to innovation and entrepreneurship, you can support us and you can benefit from our power, which is not instantly visible to you, probably. I think this is really important. We are living in a competitive environment in the entire world. In order for Turkey to get to a better position, in order for universities to improve, we should start from preschool and to all the way to universities. We should undergo change. We may have raised Aziz Sancar, the esteemed scientist, but this is just a single individual success. We can, as a matter of fact, multiply the examples by sharing this burden on our shoulders. So please collaborate with universities, dear representatives of the public sector and private sector. Thank you. This was really an enjoyable panel for us, although we are just a tiny bit ahead of our time. Education is one of the biggest issues of Turkey, but it was really enjoyable discussing it. Thank you, dear panelists, and thank you, dear audience, for listening.